हाँ, दोस्तों मुझे जो टॉपिक दिया गया है वो है अप्रोच टू ए केस ऑफ थायराइड स्वेलिंग। और जब भी थायराइड आपको मिलता है तो आपको ये देख जो मैं बात करूंगा वो आपको ध्यान रखना है ताकि लॉन्ग केस प्रेजेंट करते समय आप उसको कैसे प्रेजेंट करें। सबसे पहली बात तो इज इट मिड लाइन स्वेलिंग और लेटरल स्वेलिंग। What could be the differential diagnosis of neck swelling can be one of the question. So these are the differential diagnosis of a neck swelling: bronchial cyst, goiter, infected cyst, cystic hygroma, lymph node, abscess, and thyroid gland. So we know that is thyroid swelling is a swelling that we have to know, is it thyroid, midline swelling, is it euthyroid or hypo or hyperthyroidism, and the other concern when the besides is hypo and hyperthyroidism is the airway, whether this airway is a difficult one and the swelling is compressing the soft tissue that leading to the difficult airway. So in history, you have to ask onset, growth of swelling, movement with swelling, with tongue protrusion, any difficulty in breathing, swallowing, or speech, uh, any shortness of breath on lying down means retrosternal goiter, pain, sudden increase in size, history of palpitation, loss of weight or gain weight, or menstrual disturbance if it's a female patient. So thyroid swelling can be euthyroid, hypothyroid, and hyperthyroid. On the basis of sign symptom, and if we are allowed, we can do investigation, we can confirm it. Euthyroid means the sleeping pulse rate is less than 100 per minute and there should be no tremor, no anxiety, palpitation, and dyspnea. And there is history of pertaining to the functional status we can elicit and includes. So we can differentiate hyper and hypothyroidism depend on the symptoms. If in hyperthyroidism, weight loss, malaise, weakness, heat intolerance, proximal muscle wasting, and preterval mixed edema, that is called Graves' disease, is more. Where in hypothyroidism, malaise, cold intolerance, dry coarse skin, hypothermia, carpal tunnel syndrome are more. In CNS, there is the irritability and anxiety, tremor in the hyperthyroidism, whereas memory loss, depression, and mental soreness, dementia is more in the hypothyroidism. In hypothyroidism, palpitation, breathlessness, hypertension leading to cardiac failure and tachycardia, atrial fibrillation, tachyarrhythmias are more, whereas in hypothyroidism, bradycardia, edema, also pleural effusion, and cholexmity are more. In GI, diarrhea is more in hypothyroidism and constipation more in hypothyroidism. And Graves' disease sign symptom is more and exclusively more in the hyperthyroidism, that is a blood double vision, exomphalos, lid leg, conjunctival edema, and oligomenorrhea is more in the genitourinary in females in hyperthyroidism and menorrhagia in hypothyroidism. So very well differentiate we can do basis on these signs in both the disease. In examination, if you see face, it is hypothyroidism is a mask-like face or exomphalos. Skin dry in mixed edema and moist in thyrotoxicosis, anemia more in thyrotoxicosis, and sleeping pulse rate tells about the thyrotoxic severity. So in examination, we know how to examine a thyroid swelling by Pislow method, and it moves with the deglutition. In retrosternal, there is dilated veins over the thorax and lower border is not palpable like here. So it is a retrosternal goiter. We go from the behind, and by Pislow method, we examine this by the Lay's method. We palpate from the back and see each lobe consistency. If it is one lobe or both lobe, if it is a retrosternal goiter, then Pemberton sign and Kocher's test means slight push on the lateral lobe produces stridor. And Pemberton sign is this like this: when you raise the hand in retrosternal goiter, there is redness of the face, and especially in fair colored person occur. So also we can differentiate retrosternal goiter by not able to reach down the lower border, and percussion over the manual sterni is dull. And auscultation in we do then the brute in the thyrotoxic. These are the group of eye signs, example Steelbeck sign. Old examiner asked. Van Grieve, Mobius, Gillard, and Joffrey. So just to remember the historic thing, lid lag, or Kocher sign is stark looking, Mobius sign is weakness of the convergence, and Pemberton sign, as I already said, it is facial flushing on inspiratory stridor, distended veins, increased JP in retrosternal goiter. So what is the physiology of thyroid gland? We know that there is T4 go in circulation, convert in T3, and it attach on the nuclear receptor, and it is responsible for the functional response of the thyroid hormone like growth, CRS, BMR, metabolism, and cardiovascular. So what is the effect of thyroid hormone on CVS? We know it increases sympathetic activity, increases heart rate, contractility, stroke volume, and cardiac output. It increases BMR, oxygen consumption. It decreases the systemic vascular resistance and increase systolic blood pressure with wide pulse pressure. So this is the effect of thyroid hormone on the CVS that we can get in hyperthyroidism. So it is regulated by hypothalamic pituitary axis, uh, has a negative feedback mechanism on the thyroid and the hypothalamus. And how the thyroid hormone is synthesis, this can be asked. First, there is iodine trapping in thyroid gland. And second is the oxidation of iodide binding to the tyrosine that gives the monoiodo and diiodo-tyrosine. And they bind, they make mono-di to the tri and di with the T4, and they bind with in presence of TSH with thyroglobulin, and they coupling occur, and after that they release and recycle this thyroglobulin T3 T4 complex. They in presence of TSH there occur proteolysis, and they convert the plasma in plasma T3 and T4. So how this hormone synthesis occur can be asked like this. So normal values of TSH, T3, T4 are shown in the slide. And by this hormone assay, we know that in primary hyperthyroidism, Graves and toxic nodule, they are low TSH and high free T4 and free T3. So free T3, T4 are more important than the T3, T4. And in primary hypothyroidism, there is high TSH and low free T4 and T3. So this is the diagnostic criteria on investigation. So once you diagnose the patient has hyperthyroidism, then we have to start anti-thyroid drugs. Or if it is hypothyroidism, we have to start altoxin, the thyroid supplement. So if it is hyperthyroidism, the anti-thyroid drugs are the inhibitor of hormone synthesis, propyl thiouracil and methimazole. For blockage of hormone release, there is iodide or iodinate contrast medium or radioactive iodine. For anion inhibitor, we have percolates and the thiocyanates. And for beta blocking drugs, we have propanol. So these are the slides that showing that how these different drugs act. This they act on the transport, they act at the peroxidase level, they act at the iodide or thiamides that convert, that inhibit the conversion of or binding of the mono or diiodo in thyroglobulin, or there are drugs act on the proteolysis, and drugs at the blood level where they act, they decrease the peripheral conversion is the T3 and T4. So this can be asked like antithyroid thiamides are the propyl thiouracil and methimazole, and methimazole is more potent and longer than propyl thiouracil. So these are used in treatment of mild thyrotoxicism in presence of preparation for surgery, and propyl thiouracil is relatively safe and preferred in pregnancy. This can be asked. So other antithyroid drug are the potassium iodide that if they block the organification and release of inhibition of proteolysis by Wolff-Chaikoff effect, and radioactive iodine, they serve as alternative to surgery because they easy and effectively in absence without any pain, but they are not they can reduce the thyroid function, but they are not advisable in pregnant women. So the anion, the other, these are drugs that propanol and lithium amiodarone that can be used especially when there is cardiac symptom of thyrotoxicosis. So when you started drug, we have choice of as all investigation we do besides the thyroid function hormone, like echo and chest X-ray and other tests in preoperative investigation. For anesthetic consideration, we know that the hyperthyroidism patient, they have there can be problem of high blood loss, problem with the positioning because the thyroid surgery do in a extensive extension neck position. And if it is parasternal goiter, then sternotomy to be done. Chance of thyroid storm and post-operative complication, besides the very well-known anticipated difficult airway, and surgery is very close to airway, and chances of thyroid storm and all arrhythmias are there. And how we will prepare, we have to arrange blood, avoid sympathotomimetic drugs, use of good sedative, narcotic, and benzodiazepines is needed. No sedation if anticipated airway compromise is known, and patient should be euthyroid with a sleeping pulse rate less than 85 per minute. We can do an indirect laryngoscopy in X-ray to know the difficult airway, and we should continue antithyroid drug and beta blocker. And leucoiodine to be done 10 days to reduce the vascularity if large size tumor is there. Preoperative fasting as per ERAS, hyperthyroid, anti-hyperthyroid drug to be continued. If patient is hypothyroidism, continue the thyroxine on which the patient TSH is controlled, and give anti-aspiration prophylaxis and an anxiolytic. As per, the choice of anesthesia is general anesthesia with endotracheal intubation. PG students should not speak cervical, epidural, and superficial and deep plexus block as a regional anesthesia choice, because that can be done by expert in clinical practice. So intubation is must when is a large goiter and malignant mass with evidence of compromised airway. Choice is awake fiber optic intubation. But if it is smaller mass but no evidence of a comprehensive symptom, then direct laryngoscopy and intubation can be chosen. Choice is flexometallic tube. And if you find goiter like this in thyroid swelling, if stridor is there, the direct thyroid swelling, there is risk factor over direct laryngoscopy, intubation, and respiratory complications. So we have to choose any when there is difficulty regarding we have to induce or not, we have to keep patient awake. And the overall incidence is around 11% of difficulty in intubation by direct laryngoscopy. So depend on the thyroid swelling. And besides the hyper and hypo functioning, the size airway is almost maybe anticipated difficult airway. So planning and preparation is very important. We have to keep difficult airway cart, ask ENT stand team to stand by, avoid sedative premedication in a non-difficult airway, use small size flexometallic tube ready, and if airway collapse occur at the time of induction, rigid bronchoscope with the stunt to the airway and with a that can allow rescue ventilation should be choice. And you can turn in the patient lateral or lift the thyroid mass is one of the strategy. And what are the airway factor in thyroid swelling that can cause a difficulty airway control, especially when it is supraglottic or at the glottic level or infraglottic? There are three levels where difficulty can be in assessing the trachea. In supraglottic airway, when there are problem, these are the issues as in routine surgery, that especially obese, is short neck or less distances, the thyromental distance and less mouth opening. And so here the indirect laryngoscopy can give you look for vocal cord, and if any documentation can be done for vocal cord palsy. Also, this is important for medical legal point of view. Infraglottic factors, there are deviation, compression, or tracheomalacia because of long-standing thyroid swelling, and also there is transient recurrent laryngeal palsy. So here we have to do certain airway test, uh, especially as we do in routine. And the distances like thyromental is less than 5 is important. Also, indirect laryngoscopy using mirror can tell us cord paresis and paralysis of the recurrent laryngeal nerve. And use a small size tube and is good when all this is there. And concern with the thyroid swelling is that size of the goiter along with the main straight line of the goiter, and compressive symptom if patient have like dyspnea, dysphagia, hoarseness, or change in voice, that suggests that there is a restricted neck extension should be looked for. So preoperative radiological evidence that tells the X-rays, APL lateral view of the neck, that tells the trachea position, deviation, or if you find deviation and compression in the X-ray, then CT scan can be done to confirm it. And shift of the trachea from enlarged gland or thyroid, that can also be evidence. So whenever there is a trachea deviated or retrosternal goiter with compression, awake fiber optic is choice. Otherwise, trachea deviation without retrosternal goiter, the inhalation induction can be done. But all patients should be tried with awake fiber optic, especially when trachea is central and no tracheal compression symptom. Then we can think for IV inhalation induction with laryngoscopy. If it fails, then we can think of surgical airway tracheostomy or rescue airway. So airway approach is very important. Sometimes direct laryngoscopy and intubation influenced by the experienced person, change of blade, and the burp maneuver. Laryngeal manipulation can be helpful by required pressure. Alternative aid like change of blade, gum elastic boogie, McCoy blades, that can help. Even if laryngoscopy fails, then LMA can be benefit for ventilation. So what are the other useful devices in thyroid swelling? There are different fiber optic airway that can be beneficial with anesthetized awake intubation. What are the airway approach in when there is a glottic factor in goiter? Then glottic factor related to vocal cord palsy is not common before surgery and only can develop in like malignant tumors. Their stridor and voice change is likely warning sign, and it usually doesn't require any treatment if patient can breathe and talk properly. But as post-induction cord can be relaxed and cannot give a problem to intubate, if laryngoscope is possible, then we can go safely. Bilateral abductor palsy is commonly that is due to recurrent laryngeal nerve injury, and they lead to reintubation or in the post-operative period also. So that we have to think. So what are the airway approach in infraglottic factors, mainly related to size and duration of thyroid swelling? There can be loss of airway due to compression of trachea, or uh, uh, that is very uncommon at time of induction of anesthesia after after tracheal extubation and in the recovery room. So in patient breathing normally without breathing difficulty, securing airway during induction anesthesia is more determined by supraglottic factor than infraglottic. So patient positioning and intubation are concerns because um, uh, the monitor to be needed while we are doing intubation, uh, a small size to be chosen so that it avoid any air leak. So what are, besides not only the intubation problem in this large thyroid swelling, but also the extubation concerns are. Extubation concern that we have to do leak test. Everybody should know this, that prior to extubation, if suck of oropharynx and deflate the cuff of ETT, and if you note leak is absent in positive pressure ventilation, this is tracheal collapse. And we will not extubate this patient. Either you keep intubate or do the sometimes the tracheostomy, or you can use the endotracheal tube exchanger over the LMA, and we can keep there. So what are the factors should with post-surgical respiratory complications? Is the large size of swelling and retrosternal extension, especially assured nearing trachea. And important complication of huge thyroid swelling is tracheomalacia, and the incidence is very not much, around 1.5%. And tracheomalacia leading to tracheal collapse result from prolonged compression of trachea by huge goiter, particularly with confinements of the thoracic inlet having retrosternal extension. It is a life-threatening, and because tracheal collapse mostly take place after surgery, uh, after the thyroid tissue has been that is supporting the trachea is excised. So diagnosis is simply by leak test, and if you find that uh, post-extubation airway obstruction may be related due to partial or complete obstruction. Besides the tachypnea, there can be hematoma, laryngeal edema, recurrent laryngeal palsy, and tracheal collapse. So stridor is suggested of partial airway obstruction and may be related with upper airway edema and transient abductor cord palsy. How to tackle airway obstruction after extubation? By an accessible backup plan, monitor for airway obstruction and breathing difficulty after extubation, and preparedness for reintubation. The first and foremost attempt should be ensure oxygenation and ventilation. A quick review to be done to assess adequate recovery from relaxant and by hand grip and head lift and hand grip. And respiratory parameter may be misleading in this condition, so we have to be vigilant. You can take help of a low dose scoline and steroid and reintubate patient, or if you don't want to intubate, at least use supraglottic device for maintaining ventilation and management of stridor. This is the position hyperextension to be done in thyroid surgery, and this is the